Startup funding is about to change forever. If you're a founder or a business owner, the old playbook of pitching investors and doing an accelerator, it's just not working anymore. But here's the good news. If you can understand where entrepreneurs are finding success for early stage funding, you can win big, because now there is a new way to play the startup game most companies just kind of ignored before. We know this because we bootstrapped our business using these alternative programs, and we won millions of dollars in research and development contracts and kept 100% ownership of our company. We are, of course, talking about the SBIR and STTR program, and this week we asked our audience to send us all of the questions that they are too afraid to ask about getting the government to cover your R&D startup costs. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Dauntless XR. That's the company that we bootstrapped through SBIR funding. I'm joined today by Sophia Luzaro, who co-founded Dauntless XR with me and is also our co-host over here today. And we started Intrepid to share all of the things we learned the hard way going through the SBIR program and bootstrapping our business.
We spent a lot of money on consultants along the way, and we would love to save you the trouble of doing so. So we will teach you everything that we learned from both winning and losing.
We have about 20 questions today.
Yeah, rapid fire.
Okay.
Let's go. And we're giving 10,000-foot answers here. If you want more detailed answers to some of these questions, head to the blog. This is the TLDR version of the answer.
Yeah. The first question we got, what are SBIR data rights? When the government pays you to develop an innovation under the SBIR program, they have limited rights to use that innovation for 20 years. They're not allowed to disclose it outside of the government, but they are allowed to use it within the government without paying you any additional money for it. When you see SBIR data rights, that's what it's referring to. And SBIR data can be source code, sketches, drawings, formulas, equations, reports, descriptions of the SBIR technology, your final reports, and pretty much anything else you submit in writing to the government. They own that for 20 years. The caveat is they can't disclose it outside the government. They can't go sell it. So if you developed something before you entered the SBIR program, you do have to let the government know, hey, this was developed at private expense, so you can't use it for free. We have a blog post that covers all of that in detail to make sure when you're submitting an application that you mark up your SBIR data properly.
Next question. Are SBIRs or SBIR funds taxable? Yes. SBIR funds generally are considered taxable income for your business. Now, your business, depending on your situation, may be able to claim some or all of the funds under the R&D tax credit. The law has flip-flopped on how much of that can be claimed and whether you can claim it all in 1 year or whether it needs to be amortized over 5. Our main recommendation is you should assume that there's some tax liability on those funds. You need to consult an accountant well in advance of filing season, because if you go the route of using an R&D tax credit, you may need an R&D study to support that credit. We learned this the hard way, so you don't have to. Be sure when you're selecting an accountant or CPA to ask if they have experience with SBIR grant accounting and R&D tax credits. And ask this in the most specific way you can. So did you last year file on behalf of any businesses using R&D tax credit for funds received through grants or other federal programs? That's how specific you want to be when you're asking the question. Promise you it's going to save you a lot of heartache about finding the right person.
Rule of thumb, if you're a C Corp, you're going to pay 21% tax on all of the money that you get from the SBIR program, so budget accordingly. Engage a CPA who has done SBIR or SBIR related accounting before. I did see this question on Reddit. There is no magic accounting software you can buy to make your tax bill disappear if you do win an SBIR award and then don't put money away to pay the taxes on it.
My God, I know exactly which thread you're talking about.
Nasty surprise at tax season. Next question, how to pronounce SBIR? So the government loves to have their acronyms and different ways of saying things. It is perfectly acceptable to say SBIR. As you've heard us say a couple of times, some people say SBIR. It's the same thing. Yeah. I mean, I say it most of the time too. And then the sister program, STTR, some people will call that STTR, even though there's no I in it. You will sometimes hear it referred to as STTR and SBIR. It's the same thing. Both are acceptable to say.
Good segue. Next question. What is the difference between SBIR and STTR. SBIR, Small Business Innovation and Research Program. It's dedicated federal funds for small businesses. For whatever your small business wants to do, you have the option, if you would like, under SBIR, to partner with a research institution, but it is not required. You can be a private business only and apply for that program. STTR is Small Business Technology Transfer. Don't ask me why the acronym doesn't work as well as SBIR's does, but that's the acronym. That program, it's a separate pot of money than SBIR, and to go after topics or solicitations marked as SBIR, your business must be formally partnered with a nonprofit research institution such as a university. Depending on the agency, there's going to be a requirement of what percentage of funds have to be allocated to that research institution. It could anywhere be 30 to 40%. So again, for a SBIR, you can partner with a research institution. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. You could give them 5%, 10% of the work. For STTR, you are required to have a research partner that's a nonprofit institution, and there's going to be a set amount of funding that is required by the agency to go to that research partner.
And some of the time, STTRs are for more money, but not often. Oh, and STTRs are also generally less competitive because a lot of people find it harder to find a research partner, so there's not as many people going after those awards. So that's something to consider if you're debating between the two.
Okay, next question. How can startups use the SBIR program? We see startups use SBIR, STTR in two ways primarily. First, very simply, it's a source of capital. It costs money to research and develop the products that you want your company to sell. In this case, it would be used by a small business or startup instead of or in addition to VC funding. It's a capitalization strategy, pure and simple. This reason is why SBIR is often referred to as America's seed fund. Like a VC, through the program, the government is going to take a chance on your idea and your team for a set amount of money to see if you can release a feasibility study, a prototype, MVP. Unlike a VC, the government is not going to take any equity in your business. The second way startups use SBIR is to gain the government as a customer. Successfully winning a Phase 1 grants your business what are referred to as Phase 3 rights. This means that any federal agency can contract with your business directly, no competing the contract, no other contracting vehicles like you need to go pay for, GSA schedules, things like that. This means any federal agency can contract with your business as long as it's in the scope of the proposal of what was awarded. For example, if you were awarded a proposal for XR training for a specific topic, you could engage in a contract for XR training for a slightly different topic on the same technology grounds, right? With a different federal agency without having to go through a competitive bid process. Winning a Phase 1 does not guarantee that you can convert all your sales opportunities, but it does get you a foot in the door.
It's a minority of companies that use SBIR to start selling to the government. Most people that come into the program are just looking for funding, and if becoming a government contractor works out for them, that's great, but it is a very small percentage of companies that actually end up doing that. I think it's like 3% convert to Phase 3 and go on to become like long-term government contractors.
So startups have to take short, medium, and long-term bets when it comes to their business, right? In our view, SBIR and STTR sits in that medium to long-term category for your business. If you're in a position to make those kinds of bets and opportunities, and there's alignment between things the government wants to fund from an R&D perspective and what you're doing, I say go for it. If that alignment isn't there very clearly, or the stage that your business is in, you're needing to focus on more short-term gains, it's probably not a good fit for you.
If you're trying to sell t-shirts, the SBIR program is probably not for you unless those t-shirts happen to be like bulletproof or something you can wear in outer space or on Mars. And if you have a ton of venture capital funding and you're under the gun to get acquired or get to profitability or have an exit, this program takes a long time, so it is not a quick fix in that context either. But I think if you check the boxes of doing something that's innovative, you're trying to build something that has never existed before, maybe it's a bit of a moonshot, high risk, high reward, and you want to bootstrap and keep your cap table clean, and you have the time to make those medium and long-term bets, if you check any one of those boxes, then I think the SBIR program is completely worth it. And Sophia, you alluded to this question coming up in your previous answer. How much does it cost to apply for an SBIR contract? The government does not charge you anything. You can go submit a proposal for free, but the cost to your business, so your time and your resources, is around $10,000 for a phase 1 and around $20,000 for a phase 2. If you go to a proposal writing consultant because you're like, I'm going to outsource that cost, they will charge you a minimum of $5,000 to write this proposal, even if they're using AI. So those are kind of your baseline costs. We wrote our initial phase 1s. I wrote them on my own time. Now we are really picky and choosy about what phase 1s we go after, and definitely direct to phase 2s because they are such a resource intensive exercise to put them all together. But if you're just starting and you've kind of got nothing to lose, $10,000 worth of your time might be worth it to land a 250K phase 1.
Similar question to an earlier one, but a separate question. Is SBIR a federal grant? It depends on the agency. Some agencies are going to award their SBIR funds through grants, while others are going to award them through contracts. DoD, SBIRs, and STTRs have been exclusively contracts, but other agencies really vary. A most recent breakdown I could find was from 2020, and it showed that of the dispersed funds from the SBIR program in 2020, about 50% of those funds were awarded as contracts and about 50% were awarded as grants. NSF is grant, DOE is grant, and I'm Department of Energy, not Department of Education. I bet Department of Education, when it existed, was grant. But yeah, it was a lot more of the ones that landed of the R&D that landed on the R side of that equation when I was looking at the breakdown. So like a lot of NSF is grant, a lot of NIH is grant, HHS, same thing, mostly grant. So I think it has something to do with the R versus the D. If they expect a deliverable, it's a contract. If they're paying for a study, it appears to be more on the grant side.
That's what Navy should do. They should convert all of their SBIRs to grants.
Agreed.
And what can SBIR funds be used for? When you go to apply for a particular topic, there will be a document in there that tells you exactly what you are allowed to use the funds for. In general, you can use the dollars that you get from an SBIR contract or grant to pay US-based employees to do work related to your research and development. They have to be US based and US citizens or permanent residents. You can also use that money to buy equipment and materials related to the innovation. Sometimes you are allowed to use the money to pay for travel, but again, not always. Most of the time you can though. And you can use that money to pay subcontractors and consultants so long as they are based in the US and they are US citizens or permanent residents. Some agencies have this extra bucket of money that you get with your SBIR contract called TABA. It's additional funding that you can use to pay a dedicated vendor to help you write subsequent proposals, or that you can use to pay a lawyer to file patents for you. Each agency has their own way of distributing and managing TABA or TABA funding. So those are generally the things that you are allowed to use SBIR funds for.
So not leasing a car, not a vacation.
No. I mean, you can lease a car if it's part of your travel.
True.
When you're paying your employees and your subcontractors and doing all of your travel, you do have to justify your costs against the GSA rates. So the government has published rates every year that give the average of what all of these things cost. So they have a schedule somewhere that will say if you're in Los Angeles, this is how much you're allowed to expense to the government per night for a hotel room. Same thing with car rental, same thing with airfares, all of that. They want to make sure like you're flying commercial in economy, you're not renting a private jet. You're allowed to expense some things, but there's checks and balances on those expenses. And they will check or they will ask.
Yep. Next question. What happens if we miss a SBIR submission deadline? Unfortunately, the deadlines for this program are strict. Late submissions aren't accepted. I've never heard of a situation of them being accepted. And if it was a limited release topic, there's no guarantee that that topic will open again. There is even language in most of the BAAs that I've seen, which are the instructions that come out with the release for a set of SBIR and STTR topics, that specifically says that for submissions that use DSIP, like all of the DoD ones do, which is a program online to submit. If there are technical issues with DSIP on the day of proposal submission that prevented you, the small business or startup, from completing your submission, it is still considered an incomplete submission and will not be considered. Remember, this program is crazy competitive. If you give them a reason to discount a set of proposals, they will do it. A deadline is a great way to weed out proposals, and they use it that way. So our recommendation is to make sure your proposal is submitted and certified in DSIP at least 24 hours before the deadline. You can always, if you're tweaking one more graphic or there's one more read through you want to do the day before, you can always edit that, re-upload whatever it was that you changed, and re-certify. The government will only look at the most recent documents that are submitted before the deadline, but what you don't want to do is throw 1-2 weeks of work down the drain. So get it in early, certify. If you need to do last minute tweaks, upload your changes.
To reiterate, the government says if there is a problem with their government website when you go to submit your application and you can't get it through, they don't care. One of the things we do just as a best practice is once the proposal is in, whether that's in DSIP or Valid Eval, those are the two big ones, we take a screenshot of the page that says, success, you submitted your proposal at this time on this date. So if there is some kind of mix up down the line where they're like, oh, your proposal was not in compliance because you didn't submit it properly, you can go show them that screenshot and be like, hey, actually, you guys said it was fine. So that's, some of the things you can do to kind of CYA. Next question, who is eligible for SBIR? In general, U.S. small businesses with less than 500 employees that are registered as a small business with the SBA and owned by U.S. citizens or permanent residents are eligible for the SBIR program. You are still eligible for some awards if you have investors on your cap table, whether those investors are American or not, but you do have to check by topic for that. But in general, if you have a legal entity and you're based in the US, fewer than 500 employees, you get your registrations, you'll be eligible to apply.
Next question. What does dual use mean? This is a term that the SBIR and STTR programs like to throw around a lot. So let's define it, and then we can talk about whether or not it's a reality for most companies in a separate conversation. Dual use in this context means that your technology, your hardware, your product has both commercial or private sector and government or public sector applications and customers. This is ideally the type of product technology that the SBIR program funds. So if your startup or small business actually started in a commercial market and you have maybe demonstrated some traction, your solution actually has the potential to score very strongly on the commercialization section for a SBIR or STTR proposal. A classic dual use technology that people love to reference is GPS. It was developed by the government for military navigation, but it's now used by everyone. It was not developed through the SBIR program, by the way, but it is a classic example of a dual use technology. Now, whether or not it's realistic for a business to be truly dual use really comes down to what you're building. The government needs a little bit of everything. They need project planning software, just like Fortune 100 companies do. But there are a lot of things that the government wants research and development funding on that have a limited public sector market, and that can be really challenging when you're looking at these proposals.
The conversation around dual use is changing as well because the government, especially the DoD, can see the value in something that only has military applications, and you really would not want it to be dual use. So like anti-drone for, like shooting drones out of the sky, they might not have a really great commercial sector use for that. Like maybe you could sell it to police and emergency responders, but limited applicability there. And it's especially comes into question when you're working on technologies that require secret or top secret clearance to build. You really can't sell that commercially. Maybe you can have a version of it, but it's not true dual use at that point. So I think the conversation around dual use is changing as well, but it's a different topic for a different day. Next question, what is a BAA for SBIR. As you can tell, the government loves its acronyms. A BAA is a broad agency announcement, and you will notice that a lot of government contracting opportunities will come with a BAA. And what it is a set of instructions that tells you exactly how to prepare a proposal and submit it. The BAA document will be, like hundreds of pages long potentially. The ones for SBIR are usually 40 to 90 pages long, and it will give you exactly what they want to see in your application. It will give you the templates, it will tell you the funding caps, the timelines, all of that. It'll even tell you how to format the page properly so that you're in compliance. It is really important when you're doing your first couple proposals that you do actually read every page of the BAA. You don't have to do it every single time. Like now I know what section to go to look for the information I need, but it is good practice the first couple times around to read everything. Related to the BAA, for SBIRs, there are two documents. There's the broad agency announcement, which will cover everything in that release, so like all of the topics under a particular cycle. Then there will be component instructions, and those instructions sort of supplement the BAA. Sometimes they will contradict it and it will tell you which one takes precedence, but it's a related document that will give you even more instructions that might be specific to that agency or specific to that particular topic, because some topics will have unique requirements. So the BAA is one of the two documents you need to look at to make sure your proposal that you're preparing is going to meet all of the requirements to make it to an evaluation step.
Next question. What is a SBIR funding agreement certification? This could have been a Slack message that I could have sent you once upon a time. Very simply, it is a form. It's a standardized form. You can find it either in the BAA or the topic instructions, usually at the end. You sign it on behalf of your business to confirm that your business meets all of the SBIR eligibility requirements and that you will follow the program's rules. You upload it typically as a part of your Volume 5.
All right, what is the difference between an SBIR Phase 1, a Phase 2, a Phase 3? Both SBIRs and STTRs are part of a phased program, so this means you don't just come in one day and the government gives you a $10 billion contract. They start you out on a beginner contract, a Phase 1, where you typically deliver some kind of feasibility study or maybe a prototype, depending on what stage your innovation is at. These Phase 1s are pretty short. Most Phase 1s are 3 to 6 months, and the funding caps match that. They're between $75K up to $250,000. And what the government wants to see out of this Phase 1 is that you can meet all of your deliverables, you're on time, you can actually produce the milestones that you said you were going to produce in your contract. And if you are successful at your Phase 1, you will be invited to submit a proposal for a Phase 2. This is usually specified as sequential Phase 2 because you can jump and do something called a direct to Phase 2, but they are really hard to win. In Phase 2, these contracts are longer, so 18 to 24 months, and the funding cap is also higher. So this could be $750,000 all the way up to $3 million. The $3 million ones are usually reserved for innovations that have something to do with being launched into space, so something that you need to get on orbit. So they give you a little bit of extra money to make that happen. But most Phase 2s are around the $1.5 million mark. During this phase, you will be required to produce some kind of MVP. They definitely want to see a real deliverable that they can use at the end of this stage. The next stage is Phase 3. Once you get to Phase 3, you are no longer using small business administration money. You have to go get Phase 3 funding from your government customer. And what is really confusing about a Phase 3 is you can actually be awarded one at any time. So if you win a Phase 1, you automatically unlock the ability to win a Phase 3. If you have a government customer that just like falls in love with you the day you win a Phase 1 and they're like, oh my God, we want to give you a $10 million contract, they can do that on a Phase 3 the next day. I have heard 0 instances of that ever happening, but it is technically and legally possible. The Phase 3 is also sometimes called the unicorn contract because it can be for any dollar amount. It can be for $10 or $10 billion. There's no cap to it. The only restriction is that the money does not come from the Small Business Administration. It has to come from the government customer.
We have a related question as our next question. This question is, what is SBIR Phase 0? So Phase 0 is not an official SBIR phase. This term is actually used to refer to the planning stage, especially for a new business, a new entrant, where they are prepping their proposal, they're lining up all their registrations, maybe building relevant partnerships if they're going after an STTR before they apply for their first Phase 1. So many states and even some agencies actually have Phase 0 support. These could be resources like workshops, this could be access to grant writers. You can search to see if there's any where you are located, if there's any universities near you, or if the agency that you are applying to for in particular has any Phase 0 resources. But that's the term that is used to describe that pre-Phase 1 planning period for a new entrant or a business that's never done work with the government before.
Next question, we're getting towards the end. Are SBIR proposals public? A lot of businesses that have IP that they're trying to protect worry about this, and in general, no, your proposals are not made public. They're not searchable anywhere outside of the government. However, if you are successful and you get an award, they will publish the abstract that you submit under your cover page or your volume 1. That is public. It goes on sbir.gov and anyone can search for it and read what's in there. So as general good practice, when we're writing our abstracts, we write them with that in mind. So we tend to not include proprietary information. We don't include specific people's names if they don't want to be searchable on the internet. So no, the proposals are not public, but your abstract is.
Last but not least, this has been the funnest, weirdest round of 20 questions. How do SBIR contracts work? Okay, I'm going to assume you mean like after you've won one, like what happens? If you win a contract, you agree through your proposal that you wrote to deliver specific results or milestones for the agency that awarded it. The deliverables that were established in the proposal that you submit would be the ones that you fulfill in order to fulfill that contract. The contract is going to have a set period of performance as well. That also would have been a part of your proposal, whether it was 6 months or 18 months. The deliverables vary. Most typically for a Phase 1 SBIR contract, it's going to be a feasibility report. For a Phase 2, it's going to be a demonstration of a working prototype. And for a Phase 3, it's the Wild West. It's most likely going to be like a license for working software or procurement of whatever the hardware actually is that was developed.
Once you're awarded the contract, a contracting officer will reach out to you and negotiate the terms of that contract. So what milestones you have to meet, what you have to hand over, and on what schedule. And then usually the agency will do some kind of kickoff call, especially if it's a Phase 1, to kind of get things started. And once you start meeting those milestones and you submit that information to your government customer, they will set off an approval step on their side so that you can go and invoice and get paid for your work. And I wanted to bring that up because a lot of people are like, "Oh, I've won a contract. This is awesome. I'm going to get paid all this money tomorrow." No. You're going to get paid this money in like 30 to 60 days. So make sure you budget and schedule for that. Nothing about this process is instant, other than getting disqualified. They will instantly disqualify you for things, but everything else takes time.
No, that's a great call out, and interesting that we didn't get that question. But yeah, technically you invoice after a deliverable, so you're doing work at risk.
Yes.
Which is common in the private sector as well. That is something that happens, but I think it's built into the structure of this program, which I think is useful for businesses who are thinking about it.
Well, that was our 20 very weird questions on SBIR. If you found this helpful, be sure to check out our free SBIR guide to winning your first contract. We'll link it below. And if you have any more questions, drop them in the comments or DM them to us. We'd love to do another video like this. And with that, good luck out there with your proposal writing, and we'll see you next time.